Harvard president Claudine Gay resigned after all that fierce backlash over her controversial testimony on anti-Semitism at the Ivy League School of Harvard, as well as dozens of allegations against her of plagiarizing other people's work. But apparently, she says she is the victim. Well, this is Outnumbered. We'll do some victim busting. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here's my co-host, Emily Compagno. Also joining us today, co-host of The Bottom Line on Fox Business, Dagan McDowell, director of the Tech Policy Center at the Heritage Foundation, Kara Frederick, and former Biden campaign surrogate, Kevin Walling. Calls for Claudine Gay to resign began after her shocking congressional testimony last month when she failed to say that calls for genocide of Jews on campus would violate the school's conduct policy.
That calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
It depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign.
Well, despite all of the condemnation after that, Claudine Gay waited nearly a full month after that hearing to resign, and did so without apologizing for her incendiary testimony. Instead, she said in a statement, "It has been distressing to have doubt cast on my commitments to confronting hate and to upholding scholarly rigor, two bedrock values that are fundamental to who I am, and frightening to be subjected to personal attacks and threats fueled by racial animus." She had to talk to some of those students on campus who were Jewish when they were looking for the Jewish people on campus. Some in the media were quick to blame conservatives for her resignation. Here's from Politico. How the right toppled Harvard's president, Associated Press, said this: Harvard's president's resignation highlights new conservative weapon against colleges, plagiarism. The New York Times with this: conservatives see Harvard President Claudine Gay's resignation as a victory. Gay's defenders also blaming racism.
There is this sort of open war on Black progress, Black history. Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard University, at least up until she resigned, is now the latest casualty of that.
There very much is a racial component because those presidents were not subject to the same kind of assessment, the same kind of criticism. They were not categorically dismissed as diversity hires.
That's why Claudine Gay was under attack. The fact that she's a Black woman and the first person who is a Black American to lead Harvard only added to their thirst to dethrone her. And, you know, those attacks, I don't have to say that they're racist, because you can hear and see the racism in the attacks when people like Vivek Ramaswamy say, okay, this is a problem about diversity in hiring.
So when they were hunting Jewish faith students on campus, and those students were fearful, and we were toward the beginnings of the Israel-Hamas savages war, those savages, October 7th, what they had done to trigger that war. When all of that was going on Claudine Gay's campus, she was in charge, those were the victims. Now people say she's the victim, so now she's saying it.
And what is Black progress about being anti-Semitic? What is progress about refusing to defend those underserved communities, that vulnerable community that is frightened to death, literally, on your campus? The Wall Street Journal had an amazing editorial board article today where it discussed the fact that, while she sort of towed the line on her testimony of, well, this is actionable, oh, well, this is protected under our campus policies or First Amendment, the reality is the rest of Americans saw her as smugly dismissive, as refusing to defend those that need defending right now, that need even just an acknowledgement that they are actually being attacked physically and emotionally with an attempt at genocide, and that the world has now condemned them. And she had nothing to say for it. And to your point, the fact that she now comes out, as Tom Elliott pointed out, in her resignation letter, 0 references to apologies, 0 anything. It's 17 references to 7 to me, 11 to my and 1 to myself. She sees herself not only as the victim, but as the center of the universe, when the universe was so much bigger than that. And it's incumbent upon Harvard right now to right this wrong, because it was she that was a blight on their reputation. It was her leadership that was dragging them down in the mud. And they can take this moment, they can take this juncture and say, not again, not anymore. And they can instill a president that will push back on the ridiculously racist and anti-Semitic views that they call progressive, because it's anything but.
You know, Kevin, as I'm listening to Emily, you can't get beyond the point of what Emily is saying, and that is there's a flip of a switch that's gone on in our society. And seeing victims, it first started happening with crime and soft on crime policies and giving the criminals a little bit more of a break than the victims, and then misidentifying who the real victims are in all of this. Why do we keep doing that?
It's a good question. I think, you know, what we've seen in the wake of October 7th is this rise of anti-Semitism. When you have 73% of Jewish students on college campuses right now that have said they've witnessed anti-Semitism just in this last academic year, and to Emily's point, you had those 3 college presidents, the easiest question is to condemn genocide. The easiest question is to condemn Intifada from the river to the sea.
So why won't they do it?
Well, and now they didn't, and now there's repercussions. And those repercussions are just. And we have got to wipe this anti-Semitism off the face of the earth, especially off the face of these college campuses.
But is that what she did, though? Because as Emily said, you know, to read a blanket statement and not to have that apology for those students who may have feared for their lives, literally, while I was trying to make up my mind of what to do and really what the cause was here on the elite campus, whichever one it was, there were 3.
Yeah.
In that time, maybe just a simple apology. I'm sorry if you felt frightened, because it took me a while to reach the right conclusion.
It was a failure, 100%. And to Emily's point, the fact that it wasn't even acknowledged in the resignation is hugely problematic. I'm happy that there are repercussions for this. Maybe there was some money attached to that, though. Tammy Bruce and I were talking in the green room when this broke, and I said, look, there's a reason why she didn't get fired. She quit, right? I would have thought she would have stayed to take the money, and Tammy said, we will never know what happened behind closed doors. But what corporations usually do is a little negotiating to make sure that the right things get said on your exit. Exactly right.
Emily would know about that from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
And she's still on the faculty. So she just stepped down from the presidency. So I'm sure she's still under the cloak of that protection. And Harvard will never say this was an unequivocal mistake. To, as recently as December 12th, stand by her and say that her leadership is exactly what we need in this moment, when it's anything but.
Well, and she has tenure, too, and that's always a process on college campuses as well.
But really,
Wait,
Kevin,
that's code for money. Go ahead.
I think it's like you were saying, Harris, before, it's really a lack of accountability. And the whole enumeration of I, me, you know, she doesn't seem contrite about this necessarily. She's saying, I'm being attacked, I'm being the victim. So it remains to Harvard, as you said, Emily, to see, are they going to choose one form of DEI czar and exchange it for another DEI apparatchik? You know, what are they going to do going forward? I think that will tell the tale of what they learned.
Question. All right. CNN appeared to defend Claudine Gay's plagiarism scandal. Let's watch.
Claudine Gay has had to issue corrections, multiple corrections. Now, we should note that Claudine Gay has not been accused of stealing anyone's ideas in any of her writings. She's been accused of sort of more like copying other people's writings without attribution. So it's been more sloppy attribution than stealing anyone's ideas.
Ugh. Let me quote Coleman Hughes, who is a CNN analyst, who's a terrific author. Claudine Gay has no one to blame but herself. She chose an easy path of plagiarism 50 times over the hard path of writing original prose. It's a pattern of serious fraud, plain and simple. This moment is a useful litmus test. Anyone who is blaming Gay's resignation on other factors, right-wingers or racism, is nuts and can safely be ignored for the rest of time. Of course, Coleman Hughes does not speak like that. Anti-Semitism has been boiling over for at least a decade because of diversity, equity, inclusion. When all of these highfalutin higher education institutions focused on the amorphous equity and not merit, Ivy League universities have cut the number of Jewish students in half over a decade. And never forget, Claudine Gay would still have a job if not for the plagiarism scandal, which the Harvard Corporation, the board, overlooked and denied to the New York Post, and actually shut it down by sicking a lawyer and a law firm on the New York Post. Over and over again, they tried to bury it, but hat tip to the Free Beacon, who finally kept digging and uncovered this. But the anti-Semitism that tarnishes her tenure at Harvard, she's still there, cannot and should not be minimized. The spider-like cancer that is diversity, equity, inclusion, that relegates Jewish people, Asian people, and white people into the oppressor category because they're not on the pyramid of adversity, and treats them, well, it treats them as if they're always racist. It treats them with, they actually are treated as oppressors. They're discriminated against and silenced and sidelined in the name of propping up other people. It must end, starting with Harvard. Get rid of the DEI group and fire Penny Pritzker from the Harvard Corporation Board.
Woo, I like the DAGEN group. Dagan. Wow.